Welcome, everyone. My name is Mikey Mhen. I'm going to be moderating today's conversation. I'm really excited that you're all here. I'm really excited to welcome our guests. Celine, if you want to unmute yourself, you can unmute yourself. There's a good time to do that. So welcome, everybody. I'm very honored to invite our special guest, Celine Semaan, who is a designer, advocate, writer, and founder of Slow Factory and the Library Study Hall. She's written for New York Mag, The Cut, Elle, Refinery 29, Huffington Post, among other publications. Her work has been featured in the New York Times, CNN, Vogue, Refinery 29, Scientific America, Fast Company, Teen Vogue, and many more. She's on the Council of Progressive International. She was a director. She has been a director's fellow of the MIT Media Lab and has served on the board of IGA New York, a nonprofit membership organization that helps cultivate the future of design in New York City. Celine, thanks so much for joining Afikra Conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. It's an intimate crowd.
Yeah. So, Celine, I'm super excited about talking to you. I mentioned this to you earlier. I think that I'm very much inspired by your work. And I think I want to start with a really basic question, a question related to open source. Can you sort of talk walk me through a little bit how the open source movement has been kind of a North Star, so to speak, for when you think about your work, and what Creative Commons is and how that has sort of played a role in your work?
Yes, definitely. So how many of you know Creative Commons? You can use the chat. I'm like so used to teaching on Zoom. I'm very familiar with the interface. So if you want to use the chat and tell me your experience with Creative Commons, don't be shy. It's although it is almost 20 years old, it still is a mystery to most. So Creative Commons is an open license. It basically is the gray area between copyright and public domain. So before the internet existed, there was either copyright, the C that you see oftentimes circled, and or public domain, which often is the a license that a body of work takes 70 years after the death of the author. It goes into the public domain. And there was nothing in between. Or of course you could decide to say, okay, my work is going to be public domain, but the public domain didn't have that much control over the work that you would be pushing under public domain. You can't control your work, you can't trace it, and so with the rise of the internet and the rise of the user-generated content and online sharing platforms, Creative Commons was born as a gray area between copyright and public domain. And several different licenses exist today because of the need that we had with the rise of the internet in sharing our work online and keeping the control over our work, and of course inviting others to build upon our work. And the internet basically was born this way. All the coding that happens behind the scenes of all of our favorite websites and our favorite apps was built with this sort of framework, this sort of mentality that this is the body of work. You can take it and build upon. And so you could think of it as digital building blocks, like digital Lego blocks. But when you take a Lego from someone, it inherits the sort of attribution to that author. And so as you continue building, you can also remix other people's work. And again, this was a big part of our culture online, to remix each other's work. And we spoke a bit before, Miki and I, about the idea of everything is a remix, which is a TED talk that has inspired me personally very much, and encouraged me to take work and remix it. And the philosophy is not just steal everybody's work, is when you do take someone's work to remix it, and if the license is built for that, what you put into it should elevate the work, so you're building upon each other, and that's how progress gets to be created.
Yeah, it's so interesting, because like when I think about your work, well, I'm curious, before I get into that, the other thing that I found interesting when I was looking into your work is that you came from sort of a internet-based world, in a professionally, and a design-based world, and you sort of wandered into fashion. That's what it feels like to me. Would you describe it almost as like you sort of happened, you just found yourself in the fashion world, basically?
Um, you know, I never thought I was going to be working in fashion because I
Yeah.
don't come from that space, and
Yeah.
I also didn't study fashion design. In fact, I was rejected from the fashion school, so I didn't really study that. And you know, my parents work. My mom specifically works in the fashion industry in Lebanon, and
Mm.
I hated everything about it. Like, I didn't want to do anything similar to that. It was all about like, c'est la mode. It's nice. This is how you wear things. This is, you know, and I'm like, no, I don't like any of that. And personally, my personal fashion was always trying to disappear as much as possible. So I spent a lot of time wearing just like gray gradients of gray
Mm.
or very tomboyish, like very like, please don't look like, and very modest without even knowing that modest wear was a thing, because I didn't want
Yeah.
my body to be, you know, disrespected in any which way. So I was always like wearing modest things and trying to be erased, and never imagined fashion as something I would work in, more as a costume, you know. Like, I would always see fashion as like, oh, Halloween, yay, I get to be something that I
Yeah.
never dare to be, you know. But like, at the end of the day, I never imagined myself working into the fashion industry. I was working in tech. I was working in a place where women were very rare in a workspace. So of course, that's where my whole tomboyish, like hiding my body, was needed to survive in that environment that was extremely sexist. And um and so I, you know, worked in tech, and worked with Creative Commons, and um, at one point NASA joined Creative Commons, Wikipedia joined Creative Commons. It was very beautiful moments for the work that we were doing. And when NASA joined, I always thought to myself, oh my gosh, these images, they need to be on things that we can touch. We need to get out of um, the digitalness of it. It has to be physical. We have to materialize this immaterial image. And that's where I came into the fashion industry, let's say, but without, again, understanding what I was doing. I felt the urge to print these images on fabric, and of course, by doing so, I was like, it would be so ironic if I printed something that's so holy and on
Yeah.
something that's literally killing our planet. And I didn't understand like where that thought came from. I just felt like, wow, these images cannot be printed on anything that's not good for the earth and good for the people. I don't want any form of child forced labor into the production. I don't want any form of forced labor whatsoever. And I don't want chemicals, and I don't want this, and I don't want that, just because the image that itself was so pure in a way, like the images of
Yeah.
our earth, or,
Sanctified.
yeah, like of our universe. And that's how I stumbled into the fashion industry and to sustainable fashion more particularly. On a personal level, I also hated polyester for like, with every single ounce of my body. Never wanted to wear polyester. I always touched it and been, no, it's plastic. Like, as soon as I made the relationship that it's plastic, I didn't I didn't study environmentalism, or I was just very
Yeah.
aware of how you know, our world works, and very concerned about garbage, and very concerned about our production and our ways of consuming, and also the whole cycle of fashion. Like, sometimes it's fashionable, and then the next season it's not. So what do you do with the stuff that you bought? And yeah, so when I entered the
Yeah.
fashion space, I also didn't know I was entering the fashion space. I thought this was art, you know, like, let's just make it wearable art. And I used that hashtag also when I launched. And it took us 2 years to study, where do we make these, okay,
Yeah.
and how do we make sure that this is, what are the certifications like. And that's where I found like, oh my god, there's so much opacity in that industry. That's, it's built like the imperialist old industry that it has always been. No one has challenged it. It is what it is. And that's where I began my work in the fashion industry. And the fashion people did not like me and did not want me in the fashion industry either. So it was a big journey to try to put my foot in there and force it.
Yeah. So I have questions. I have so many questions about this. Just like functionally and operationally, how did you make these? So just to fill in the gaps for the people who are listening, right, and are not viewing. So I think in 2013 you decided to print some of these images
It's
on these.
2012 actually. In 2012,
Yeah,
I um I I I
you tweeted this thing,
I
right?
launched it in 2012, the same day that NASA landed Curiosity on Mars. So
Okay.
August 8, 2012 is when we launched. And of course, I was such a geek. I loved everything about NASA, and it had to correspond with something with
Yeah.
NASA. Curiosity was, hovering over Mars, and then it landed, and we're like, we're launching. And we were
Yeah.
half ready, and we were just like, okay, 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 let's do it.
So there's all these like symbolic parts to your work, right? There's a lot of symbolism associated with your work, right? There's this juxtaposition between old sort of luxury silk scarves and new understandings around sustainability. There's this idea of the universe in all its magnitude on this small little square, this shapeless multi-dimensional thing on a two-dimensional square. There's all this like symbolism, right? But there's
Yeah.
also a lot of really good execution that is not symbolic. And so I'm kind of curious about the execution. How did you make these scarves? How did this, like, because the devil's in the details. That's actually where you kill the earth, and not in the symbolism, but sort of in the process, and how you can avoid killing the earth is through good process. How did you make this stuff?
Yeah, so first I found someone who was working with silk in Montreal,
Okay.
and she was printing on silk. And I asked her, who's printing for you? Is it sustainable? Is it eco-friendly? At the time we used those words, eco-friendly. What is this fabric from? Blah, blah, blah. And she explained it's from India, and yes, it's certified and this and that. And then I hired her, I paid her to consult for me, to help me
Mm-hmm.
figure this out. So how do I print for with like, how do you prepare your files? What's the finishing? What kind of fabric did you choose? And she worked with me and helped me develop this idea further. And this was a side project. I was working, building websites every day. And then in the weekend at night, I was like, okay, let's get to this. And we received the first batch. At first, we were manufacturing in India, and we received the first batch, and we were like, oh my God, these are like pieces of the universe. So we first started with the Hubble images, and we were
Yeah.
freaking out, and it sold out in my apartment, like not even online. So we did a second round immediately after, and the second round was not the same as the first round. The production was uneven, and that's where I started understanding where I got myself into this whole fashion thing. It's never the same, because these guys, they source from here and there, and yes, they say it's sustainable, but it may not be, because there's opacity after the trader's point.
Mm-hmm.
So the second batch was not good. And then we did the third batch. And then it was starting to get, one time it's good, one time it's not good, one time it's, and that's where I started realizing, okay, maybe this. And when you argue with him, because I'm a woman, he was extremely misogynist. And my friend Zohar, he thought she was a boy, because the name Zohar is a man and woman's name. He was good to her because he never heard her voice. He was just communicating on email. And she's like, yeah, he calls me sir. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like, I don't know how I'm going to continue working with this person, because he was so
Yeah.
disrespectful to me. And he was giving me shit, like literally shit products. And at the end, like terrible products. And so we continued working with him. I moved to New York. It was 2013. And then I'm like, okay, we're going to launch this in the fashion industry. And we packaged it. It was really beautiful. And I did a first trade show. So that's what you used to do in the fashion world. It was, you would go
Yeah.
to the trade show. It was Capsule. It was like one of the best trade shows. And I felt like, oh my God, and very social anxiety to the roof because everyone looked amazing. And I was like, oh my God, the fashion industry is so intimidating. What am I doing? And I had my booth and my things. And a friend of mine came to the booth with her friend who also works with silk. And it was serendipitous, like, hey, like, how did she
Yeah.
come to my booth and with her friend? And her friend touched my quality of silk. She's like, it's so uneven. I said, yes, it is. I'm very upset. Where do you make your silk? And she said, in Italy. And it's certified, sustainable, and it's actually the best production. And I said, do you mind sharing? And usually people are like, no. And she
Yeah.
said, yes. And I said, oh my God, thank you so much. So she made an introduction to the person in Italy. And since then, we've been manufacturing just with our Italian partners that work in the silk for 2 generations. And they make fabrics for Dolce and Gabbana. And like it's very high end,
Yeah.
basically, but it also is very sustainable. And of course there's some kind of opacity as to like who is picking the cotton that is mixed with that silk. I don't have traceability that far,
Mhm.
but and that's very problematic. We don't know, but it's very high quality materials and ink and manufacturing. So that's where we were making this silk.
Yeah. So this, what you just described, is the perfect open source approach to manufacturing, right? Like this person was showing you her code, right?
Yeah,
She was
definitely.
like, these are the libraries I'm using.
Yeah, exactly.
These are my sources. This is how I'm doing it. Go for it. You know, and which brings me to the other thing that you do and you have done for a long time, which is build community, right? This is the sort of core, one of the cores around the Slow Factory Foundation, which is we are going to try to bring all these people together and start a movement around this. Um, did you find other islands like of people who were begging for this community, or did it just slowly snowball?
Well, like I said, at first the fashion industry didn't want to do nothing with me, and even the design community in New York were like, "She's not a designer," and the fashion industry, she's like, "She's not a fashion designer," um, and every time they had these conferences, they didn't have that much, but when they did, it was so boring. Oh my God, I was like, "This is like out of our minds, boring. They're talking about very superficial things. They're not addressing the issues." I would ask questions and they would be like, oh my God, like, who are you? And
Yeah.
they were not nice anyway. So then I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to do my own. And they would not invite me to speak. They didn't want to hear about Slow Factory. They didn't want to hear about nothing I was doing. So, and then I was also I was selected to be a part of MIT Media Lab's director fellow, and they did a lot of conferences there. But they also were like, "Yeah, fashion is not something we want to talk
Yeah.
about. Like, fashion is like one of the highest ranking industries in terms of most polluting industries in the planet, and uses pretty much every single industry that you guys are working in: agriculture, oil, everything." Tanning, production, it touches human rights, it touches environmental justice. It's basically like one of the most influential industries. And the MIT Media Lab would always brush off this idea that fashion was superficial, frivolous, not
It's so
interesting.
good.
And then we were like, no, I was talking about fashion activism, developing the definition of it from 2012 to 2013. Still, people thought it was very far-fetched. Like, come
Yeah.
on, fashion is for fun.
It's so interesting. Have you seen, by the way, just as a quick side note, have you seen that Planet Money video? Where is this T-shirt from? That series of videos,
Yeah, I mean, from a long time ago.
like yeah, like from 6 years ago or so, five or
And the
six years ago.
t-shirt, and then people cry when they find out.
No, it's like it shows like where the seeds come from and who makes the big machinery, like where they twist the cotton and where they do this and like and who's making it and like all these different how deep the supply chain is and like how far away from the shelf it goes. And that like completely illuminated this idea that you're talking about for me, which is like this industry, it, cuts through so many other industries and is huge, is pervasive. So I guess what I'm trying to ask is, how quickly did the Media Lab folks like realize, oh wow, no, this is a huge problem. This is a huge
So
problem.
after fashion activism became a thing,
Yeah.
basically, they were
Yeah.
like, "Oh, you know what? Why don't you do your own conference? We're not going to
Mm,
have you speak here, but why don't you do your own conference and we'll support it?"
yeah.
And what would it be called? And I was like, fashion politics. And then we started with this title because fashion is a political,
Yeah.
medium. It's political. It talks about your status, how much you've made it in this life. Where is your ethnical background from? Where is your religious background from? It's basically your ID card.
Mm-hmm.
What you wear is who you are, and it
Your
tells about who you are, your belief system, your
your
even your
uniform.
it's basically your uniform, your intellectual status,
Yeah.
um you know your cultural status. Are you cool? Are you nerdy? Are you sexy? Are you,
Are
whatever
you
you are,
rich? Are you
you are.
poor?
Are you
Yeah.
rich? Are you poor? Are you
Yeah.
from any type of part of this world? Are you, whatever. So basically fashion is, carries meaning, and meaning can move into action. That was the idea of fashion activism. And we called it fashion politics. And then we went to the fashion world and we were like, sponsor it, join us, come speak at it. And no one wanted anything to do with it. That was before the elections under Obama. No one wanted to do nothing with fashion politics. They were
Yeah.
like, no, 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 this title is like, sorry Celine, it's just too radical.
It's a Debbie Downer.
Yeah, it's too radical, it's
Yeah.
too intense, like we really don't want to be involved in politics. Okay. So we changed the name. We're like, all right, it's about studying this industry, so let's call it Study Hall. And then that's where Study Hall comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And we launched Study Hall in New York. We kicked off New York Fashion Week. It was a very ballsy move because, again, like I'm telling you, no one wanted to be a part of this. And when I called it Study Hall, we had a couple of people that trusted us, and
Yeah.
backed us. And so we brought together a lot of cool people, and we kicked off with an astronaut talking about seeing
I
the
saw
Earth
that.
for the first
Amazing.
time. And people were blown away by this. It was kicking off New York Fashion Week. It was the day before New York Fashion Week started.
Yeah.
At the Ace Hotel, we brought all the fashion industry in the room, listening in, and we had our
So
first piece of press from that time in the Vanity Fair, which was the first time
yeah.
fashion about anything beyond frivolous stuff.
So here's a question for you. So you achieved this thing. You brought all these multidisciplinarians into the house, into the same room. You established it. After the first study hall conference, right? What did you learn? What surprised you? What did you come out the other side saying, oh shit, I didn't know that. I hadn't thought about that. That's something that this was effective, right? I didn't, what was the effect for you specifically? Who's somebody who's sort of thinking about this day in, day out?
This was after the elections, by the way. This was
Okay.
after 2016. So there's something I have to say. I was on a panel in 2016 before the elections happened. And on that panel, we were at the MAD Museum of Art and Design in New York. And a person, raised her hand in the audience, and she was like, so why activism? Like, why do you have to be so confrontational with everybody? And then we're like, because activism is about, everybody is responsible, and you are a citizen, you're responsible. Like,
Yeah.
why is it called activism to demand for clean air, clean water? Why it's not called terrorism to destroy our planet? Like, I don't understand. And
Yeah.
she didn't like that answer. Anyway, and fast forward a week later, after November 2016. And then on the panel, everyone was an activist. Everyone was wearing a t-shirt, what was it? Nasty women.
Yeah.
They were wearing a t-shirt, nasty woman, because the president at the time, who shall not be named, called someone nasty woman. And then
Yeah.
people made t-shirts, and then they went viral, and everyone became an activist after that point. And it was a very interesting time to see the shift, and fashion activism really entering kind of the mainstream as, I get, yeah, you know what, we are walking billboards, we are wearing our values. And the
Yeah.
whole concept about wearing your values became
Well, it's interesting because it's like wearing your values I totally agree. But what you're pushing at is that wearing your values is not about the design on the front. It's about how this thing is made, who made it, where it was made. And so it's like still even missing the point. It's like, oh, wearing your values with this design. But it's like,
Absolutely. And
that's
then
not what
Dior
we're
did
talking
a
about here.
collection. Yes, and then Dior did a collection. We should all be feminist. And who gets to be a feminist? Who
Yeah.
gets to be empowered as a woman when the women who made that very T-shirt, their own children pick the cotton, and they themselves don't have any rights, and they are not even paid a fair wage. So when we are wearing, we should all be feminists. Who gets to be a feminist? Who gets to be liberated? Who gets to be free?
Yeah.
You know, and that was the first questions. Other questions was people wearing Save the Planet T-shirts on polyester T-shirts, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not saving nothing.
Yeah.
Every time you wash it, microplastics are released from that T-shirt and they go into our oceans. And in our oceans right now, we have more microplastics than there are stars in the Milky Way, in like the galaxy that we are in right now.
Yeah.
Can you believe it?
Okay. This brings me to the next thing I want to talk about. This project is under the sort of Slow Factory Foundation umbrella, landfills as museums. And the minute I heard about this, the second I heard the name of this project, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is amazing. And I just want to read the copy from the website, if you will permit me.
Of course.
Landfills as a Museum is an educational initiative that challenges us to recognize landfills as sites of cultural importance, showing how waste can be incorporated into the product design process from the beginning in order to build sustainable circular systems. Can you just walk through how you came upon this project, what you're hoping to achieve with this project? Because this is, for me, so important. This idea of, this is the landfills for me, especially as somebody who lives in Lebanon right now. Landfills right now are the biggest mirror that we can hold up to ourselves to see who we are as a society and what our values are. You know, like Martin Luther King said, budgets are moral documents. Landfills are moral museums. They are museums of our morality. So I'm curious how you came across this idea and what you're hoping to achieve with it.
So landfills as museums, we were, first of all, I'm Lebanese, okay? And I also am fascinated by waste since a very young age, since actually we returned to Lebanon. And I was always wondering, like, how long is this gonna last, the way that we in Lebanon treat waste? And sadly, because of the product of colonialism, we are the product of colonialism. We have been completely disconnected from the ways that we used to be in harmony with our land, in harmony with our objects, in harmony with nature. And of course, the war did not help us, you know, imagine a life where there is longevity, and then imagine a life where there are cycles of life that are beyond us. And this survival mode got us to just also adopt whatever linear system colonial power was imposing on us through the waste streams that we have created. And I was just looking at it and being like, holy shit, like it's not gonna last, you know, in our lifetime, waste is gonna eat us, you know, in our own lifetime, the way that we're going at it. And looking at waste as like, it's waste, throw it. And then it's like, okay, but like, no, it's not, you know, like we can really use it. And I always saw beauty in it, like, you know, sadness and beauty. And I felt the same emotions as when I go to a museum, for example, always. I thought waste and wastelands and so on, and why are they far away from us? And then they got closer and closer and closer and closer and closer.
Yeah.
And they invaded us. And then, but this is a first world landfill. Like this is like a global north landfill. Not representative of any sort of landfill we have in Lebanon, because there's so much money and technology that goes into these landfills to be able to extract the methane, the chemical compounds that waste emits, and captures it and turns it into electricity. If we were able to get organized in Lebanon, these landfills could provide electricity for the entire country.
Yeah.
You know?
So
yeah.
I want to ask you a couple questions about this, because when I think about waste, consumerism, overconsumption, I think about the Middle East in many ways, right? I think about their world. And I'm curious, you're from the Arab world. Your perspective is informed by your experience. I'm curious how these messages are falling on the ears of people in the region, both when you're here and when you are, talking about this. Like, do you feel like there are people in the Arab world who are pushing this ball up the hill with you, or are you really sort of speaking into a closet of Michael?
I don't have much influence in Lebanon, but we did talk to a few people about landfills as museums before the uprising, before the
Yeah.
revolution in October, and we were this close in creating a project together. And then the uprising started, and the guy was literally like, "Please don't email me anymore. I have no time for you." And I was like, "Oh my God, okay." So let's wait and see what will happen. And with waste management, we work with waste management in here in America, and they are the biggest waste company in North
Yeah.
America, and they have consulted in the Gulf, and they have consulted in some parts of the Middle East. I don't know where. But yeah, I mean, the goal would be to create a project for Lebanon one day when we figure out
Even
funding.
sort of broader than Lebanon. Like, I think about the amount of consumption in the GCC, the amount of consumerism in the GCC, and the opportunity for you know for sustainable sort of supply chains, and if there was an interest. So I'm curious about that. I want to jump into the Q&A that you may be dreading, because I forced you to do these questions, and then if we have time, we can come back to this stuff. So let's do these 4 sort of questions, and then we'll open up to everybody in the chat. So the first question is, what are you reading or watching right now? And I apologize again
Yes.
for asking you these questions.
Yes, the questions, I found them so annoying. I was like, yo, what am I reading? Nothing. I have no time to read anything, but I do buy a lot of books. Okay. And I bought these 3 books that are on my desk that I one day will read very soon. One is called Conflict is Not Abuse. And it's about it tackles the Palestinian struggle. It talks about the Palestinian struggle, the white fragility coming from some of the white Jewish settlers that live in that region. It's written by a white Jewish woman and a queer activist, I would say, and it's about the importance of creating situations where you can talk about conflict, and it does not mean you're being abused. And
Amazing.
I mean, we need this. Anyone who works in community needs this book, I would
Can you
say.
say it one more time, the title one more time?
Conflict is Not Abuse.
Okay, great. See, now I'm happy I asked the question. Sorry, Celine, I'm happy I asked the question. That's a great recommendation.
Yes. I mean, I read some of it, and I read an article, an interview with the author, and I was just like, oh my God. And I forced all my team to get the book. Because when we work in communities that are usually, marginalized communities, oppressed communities, there's so much conflict within these communities. It's not true that we're all like, kumbaya, we're going to save the world. No one wants to talk to the other. And we've never been trained or socialized to work with one another. We've also been trained and socialized to embody our own internalized colonialism and internalized racism to separate ourselves from one another. That's what the colonial power wants us to do. That's what divide and conquer means. So when we are put in one space, and I wanted to read that book specifically because I work in community, and there's so much conflict that occurs. And I, as a good Lebanese person, I welcome conflict. I want to have a conflict. I actually want to have a fight with you. Why aren't you like, what's going on? Let's discuss it. And Americans don't. Okay. Like, they just, no, it does not compute. Like, no, Canadians don't. Like, that's just not how it works. French people think they do. They like to shout their opinion at you, but also they don't. They don't know how to question themselves, And so basically, that's why I wanted to read this book, to be better at intellectualizing the importance of conflict and not seeing it as abuse. one.
Yeah, I feel like my mother wrote this book, by the way. Okay.
But it also talks about your own internalized racism and your own internalized fragility, you
Yeah.
know? And I
She
see
wrote
it.
that section too.
Okay. Wow. I love how your mom is so woke, but not mine. Anyway, Tending the Wild.
Okay. Tending the Wild.
Tending the Wild is a Native American book about Native American traditional knowledge about agriculture, permaculture, which are all the concepts that we talk about at Slow Factory. And all of
Cool.
these are indigenous wisdom and indigenous knowledge. So I try to, educate myself as much as possible
Amazing.
from the source, which is from indigenous scholars and indigenous writers.
Mm-hmm.
And this one was a gift. The Carbon Farming
Farming
Solution.
solution.
It's a
Cool.
gift from our friends and partners at Fibershed. We work with them, and they also work in permaculture and agroforestry in California. They sent me this book about the importance of carbon when we're farming, because there's so much carbon in the atmosphere, and it's not supposed to stay in the atmosphere. We should take it and put it
Yeah.
into the soil, because that's where carbon is needed. And so that's what it's about. When I didn't read
Okay.
it, but I know what it's about.
Celine Kizebe, you didn't read any of these books.
I didn't. I swear to God. And also
Okay.
sometimes I just sleep next to the book, and the
You
knowledge gets
absorb it?
transferred. Yes.
Wow.
I
That
encourage
didn't work in
everyone to
biology
try this,
class for me.
and but don't tell your teachers. But sometimes you just stay with the book, and the knowledge gets transferred
Okay.
spiritually.
Amazing. Okay. I'm going to make you answer these a little more quickly, because I want to get to the questions in the chat. So who would you love to shadow for a day, past or present?
Ashata Seikur.
Oh, okay. Bas? That's
Bas.
it?
That's it. Ashata.
Okay.
Wait, I'm gonna write her name better with a link.
Yeah.
How
Right.
can I do that? I can't. You forced me to the full screen. That's fine.
Okay. Somebody will look it up. Somebody in the chat will look it up, I'm sure.
Somebody did. Asata Shakur. Oh, someone
Okay.
from Slow Factory.
Oh, this is Tupac Shakur's mother.
Yeah.
Of course. She's amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah. Okay.
Tab another one, Angela Davis, if I have to pick two, but you said one and it took me forever to come up with this one. So
It's okay. Buy one, get one free.
exactly.
Okay. What do people misunderstand most about your work? There is, I'm sure, a lot of stuff that people misunderstand.
Yasmin wants to follow Edward Said. Yes, Yasmin, me too. What do people misunderstand about our work, Yasmin? I don't know. I honestly, we exist in a place that is very colonial, and everyone expects that if you are working in the environmental space, therefore you must be perfect, because you must not pollute. You must not, purchase fast fashion. You must not. People think we're white as well. That's true, and that's not true. But also people think we're perfect. We're just like, oh, you work in the environmental space. And one time I came back from Target with my children, and I had Target plastic bags in my hands, in my very hands. And someone bumps into me on the street, and they're like, oh, I follow you. And then they look at my hands, and they look back at me, and they're like, you must be fake, because you just went to Target.
It's like a Curb Your Enthusiasm moment.
And then I was like, oh, but then that's where I was like,
you're shopping at Target.
No, it pushed me to say we are not perfect. It pushed me to be like, you know what? Of course I shop at Target, and it's sustainable for me. What do you think I'm going to shop at, like, Stella McCartney for my children? Like, no. And that's where I started talking about the accessibility of the sustainable movement, and also that we're not perfect, that the weight should not lie on the shoulders of the citizen. And yes, perfection is a colonial construct. Thank you very much, Yasmin.
Okay, cool. Fantastic. Okay, whose work do you admire or are inspired by?
Okay, that one I did not find an answer.
Okay.
because there's so many people that I admire, and then once I admire them and then I get to know them, I'm like, no, I I don't admire you anymore. So maybe people do the same with me, like, oh wow, I love your work, and then they get to know me and they're like, oh, you're just a human. Anyway, so
Okay,
I don't
that's
know what
good.
to say
It's
about
okay.
that.
You've given us a lot of gold
Yeah.
to enjoy. Okay, let's open it up to everybody on the chat. Our first question comes from Farah. Farah, if you want to unmute yourself, go
Hi,
ahead.
guys.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Celine. Thank you for sharing. And you're still a hero, even if you shop at Target. Don't worry.
Okay.
Um, as far as the question, I'm bringing back Target because I think it's related to this question. When it comes to sustainable fashion and fast fashion, I think we always kind of get caught between fast fashion being affordable in comparison to things that are more sustainable. So they obviously cost more to source and create. How do we make sustainability more accessible so that more people can actually make those kind of choices? And like, I'm sure this comes up a lot in your line of work. So how do you approach that as a argument against it or something?
Yeah, no, totally. So this question is the first question at every single event I've ever spoken at. Even yesterday, we had a class about the relationship between chocolate and fashion, and that was the first question. Well, if good chocolate costs so much money, how do we make it accessible? Same with fashion. And it goes back to this idea that sustainability is a culture. It's not something you would purchase. I say this often, and you cannot buy your way into sustainability. It's not true that if you're able to afford a $400 sweater, that you are more sustainable than your peer who is a single mom, who is coming from a low income bracket and community, who is shopping at Target because out of survival and because there's nothing else that she can afford. It does not make you any better. And in fact, that kind of mental construct is colonial. Now that being said, sustainability is a culture, and the idea is that whatever you purchase, you need to know how to extend its life. And also, whatever you decide to purchase, you have to see it as an investment where you put your money, basically, where your beliefs are. It's not true that you're shopping. Your wallet is helping you vote for better things, but it's not true, but it's also true that you can influence the type of purchases. And since 2013 all the way till now, we've seen an increase of over 60% of consumers wanting to buy. It's already enough that you want to buy something sustainable because it creates a pressure on the industry, and the more the public demands it, the more the industry is going to have to comply. And there are a lot of things that we can do. We can boycott, we can stop purchasing, we can be vocal on social media, we can talk about it with our friends and families, we can create swappings where maybe your old clothes that you don't like anymore can be something that someone else may like. And especially around children, that's something that we do a lot. Swapping events are becoming like cultural, like hallmarks here in New York. At least everyone wants to swap. Changing this idea around waste and around donations, and there's so much we can do culturally before we purchase something new.
Yeah, just to tag on to Farah's question, is essentially the main thing, the main point, stop buying new things.
Yeah, it's hard to say that because there's so much pleasure in purchasing things. I'm not gonna lie, like we were all raised in this shopping mentality of like
Yeah.
shopping. What is it? Psychology.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that being said, yes, there are other ways to finding pleasure and love in life, and trying to find
Retail therapy. Yeah.
yeah, retail therapy, that's the one. And that like is like it's gone after the
Yeah.
moment you buy. You don't have joy anymore, like it's gone over. And so there are other ways that we can create joy and love and community. And yes, I would say, like, definitely take a challenge where you don't buy anything for at least 6 months and see how that goes, and then extend it. There's so many people who started like this as a personal activism, to be like, I'm just gonna wear what I have.
Mm-hmm.
And see how that goes and how long that goes, and what are the first thing that I need to buy, and observe our consumption habits.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, Farah.
Don't
Saba, you're
eat Big
next.
Macs. Don't eat Big Macs and don't eat McDonald's. Don't eat Happy Meal.
Unhappy meals. Okay, Saba, you want to ask your question?
Hi. So basically, yeah, my question is kind of like, how do we change the perceptions of decision makers in both fashion and in tech? I refer to those two because those are the two that I have like firsthand experience. So far, they see either like sustainability in fashion as either cute or something that falls under the CSR umbrella. And then on the tech side, you have people that are more interested in building quick solutions, something kind of incremental, not necessarily that like fundamentally disrupts the manufacturing or supply chain processes, or at like literally any point of the process in fashion. So, and to your point earlier, it's a culture, but how do we kind of change the perception of cute into something that's kind of more of a core strategy and fundamental part of a fashion business, really?
Yes, definitely. That's something we've been thinking a lot about at Slow Factory, changing the company culture to adopt some of the basic principles that are under the understanding of good for the earth, good for the people, beyond the certifications that these companies pay, because these certifications are also the global north policing the global south. They don't necessarily support communities that they are being auditing. And so one of them is we are launching this very, very soon, and we've been working with companies in developing it, is creating a new benchmark, creating a new way of evaluating success beyond profit. And so that means where would we go beyond profit? And I know there's been a lot of conversation around planet, people, and profit, which are the 3 Ps that people are saying they are measuring. But how do you measure people? Like, how do you measure planet? What do you mean by that? And so we've been developing a benchmark that we want to work on and implement within the companies that we work with, that we are partners
So would
with.
that be like carbon, but like the carbon maybe offset or any of these types of metrics?
Yes, these types of metrics, definitely, but it's not just like a scale where you calculate your calories, it's basically like, okay, yes, you are emitting this amount of carbon. Offsetting it won't change much, because planting trees on a soil that has 60 years left on this planet is not going to be a long-term solution. We need to resequester the carbon into the soil. Are you investing in these technologies that are going to be long-term benefit for all of us, included, all of us? Are you investing in renewable energies? It's not just a calculate, I'm going to plant 10 trees, 20 trees over here. No, it doesn't work that way. So it's very much of a holistic approach. And empowering regenerative economies. That means we have to diversify into the solutions that we are bringing together. We can't just all jump into the organic cotton wagon, because like I said, if all of us are going to be going into organic cotton, there's going to be a shortage of soil, topsoil, to feed the population on this planet. We have enough cotton and enough fabric to last us generations. Okay, we have to stop planting cotton because it's a crop that's extremely thirsty, and that also it generates a lot of drought in the regions that it's being harvested. And so yes, there's so many things that that these new benchmarks create. It's basically to expand the way that the company is creating impact, and we are we're defunding marketing to fund impact, so that we can actually execute those things. We're still in the bottom of the mountain, to be quite honest with you. We're more of a pain in the ass than like, oh yeah, here's my money. Like, no, we're not there yet, but we're working really hard. We're working tirelessly in imposing this type of change within the industry.
Thanks so
Can
much.
I just like there was like that other part of the question, if it's okay, about there's also the incentive of putting money into these. So from like the tech investors, of like the startup industry.
Yes, of course.
Yeah,
We are
that's
talking to everyone to join the super fund. It's called the super fund. I know we launched one that's called super fund for Beirut. That was another super fund, but the super fund, ideally the one that is just super fund, is about the fashion industry. It's to clean the toxic sites that are the fashion industry, that are created by the fashion industry. The fashion industry itself is a toxic site. From a human rights perspective to an environmental perspective, everyone can fund the super fund. We are looking at tech, because also tech has its hands dirty in child labor. All of the cobalt and all of the minerals that are being gathered to create these phones that are disposable, they're not even designed for disassembly. They're literally disposed of in landfills, creating electronic waste, being burnt in the open air for people around the world to collect the gold that's in here to resell it on the black market. So yes, we're talking also to the to the tech industry, but of course we're a small team, to be honest, Yanni. People think we're huge, but we're not. We're very small, and we need everyone to join us and to help us make this happen.
Celine, thanks so much. We have like 6 questions.
Okay.
We have only 2 minutes left. So I'm going to ask the questions. Yasmin, your colleague, Yasmin, sorry, I'm going to skip you because you get to talk to Celine all the time.
Why? She has a question?
She has a question. So I'm going to skip Yasmin's question.
Get a white t-shirt.
Let's ask Suraya's question, and then we're going to do Ahmed and then Rhea. So Suraya's question is short. Where's the best place to get a white t-shirt? And maybe the answer is from somebody else.
I mean, white t-shirt, that's a good question because they get dirty, but the idea is, do we need white anymore? Like, no, we don't want to buy more white stuff because philosophically, khalas, we don't want to engage with whiteness. And second, if the t-shirt has a stain, we can tie-dye it and we can screen print on it. And also there are so many dead stock companies that sell dead stock t-shirts that have like a little, but okay, I say this, but of course, like I get gifted these white t-shirts that are made with recycled cotton. So maybe look for those, you know, our upcycled t-shirts and so on. I mean, we are not a gift guide. Like we don't know where to buy the stuff. We are just here to create more trouble.
So let's ask Ahmed and Rhea. Ahmed, if you want to unmute yourself and ask a very quick question.
You mentioned the word opacity at least twice during this talk, which I absolutely am like obsessed with that word. And I want to sort of ask, you know, when we always think about fashion in this sort of out of sight, out of mind kind of mentality. And I'm wondering, what does visibility for those people who have been invisibilized by the fashion industry look like to you? Especially because for me, I feel like sometimes when companies are like posting pictures of like the workers on their Instagram and being like, look at us, and it feels a little performative. So I'm wondering, how do you sort of tackle that? And where are your thoughts with regards to visibility on that front? Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you so much. Okay, so there are 2 things when we are working and tackling this idea of visibility, of lifting the veil, lifting the curtain behind the scenes of the fashion industry. There are 2 things we need to ask ourselves. 1, are we being a white savior? Okay, what's our relationship to these people? Okay, or 2, are we using poverty porn to create any kind of incentive to move people? And these 2 things usually are how white colonial structures engage with lifting the veil. Okay, white saviorism means you want to look good. It's like a selfie with a refugee child. Okay, it's basically you going behind the scenes in Bangladesh and being like, oh, here I am here saving everybody, or being the microphone. That's really toxic. Okay, we don't want to engage in that way whatsoever. And before we lift the veil, we need to engage in how do we elevate their lives before we put the microphones and the cameras in front of them, because that touches on the second point, which is poverty porn. Okay, after the explosion in Lebanon, there were tons of poverty porn images that came out, not from us, not from our groups, but from international non-for-profits that were capitalizing on our pain to gain more money so that we don't even see it. Okay, I'm talking about Save the Children, I'm talking about the UN, I'm talking about the World Food Organization, I'm talking about all of these conglomerates that have been using poverty point images to capitalize on us. We can't do this for the fashion industry. So there's lots of ethics around lifting the curtain. Very quickly, because we're almost done. My question is about defunding marketing to channel that money towards action. But in today's world, there is a need for mass education. And I wonder if you were thinking of reaching out to communication agencies to contribute to the open education platform. I think it's important to use all of the mediums out there to educate and hopefully get more people to change their habits. That's true. We do that as well. I asked because it's such a staple and was wondering, yes, that's good. My question was, what's next for Slow Factory in 2021? No, this person's from my team. Okay, Yasmin. I love the badassery.
She's giving you a softball.
I know. No, I love Yasmin and lol. It's fine. Okay, no problem. For Jen, she's my cousin, by the way. Yes, we want to work with communication agencies. We of course want to work with everybody, but of course it's very hard to pitch and talk and like convince people. So we have to focus with whoever we have in front of us. We are, as I said, a small team. We are hiring biz dev or people that can champion these kinds of solutions and talk about them with their companies to be able to work with us with our solutions and our methodology. And with that, thank you so much.
Celine, you're amazing. Thank you so much for doing this. It sounds like from the response that in about like 6 or 9 months, I'm going to have to beg you to do another one of these because this was so much fun. Those of you who are on the call, if you love afikra and you like coming to the events, please consider supporting us. We're trying to create an open, free community that publishes events and content. So if you want to support us, you can go to our Patreon page to be one of our supporters. And thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody. Night, wherever you are.